Hare Krishna. Welcome to another evening in the lives of the Vaisnava Acharyas. I'm your host, Chaturatma Das. Pleased to be with you. I see in our chat room we have quite a number of people already, and very nice to have some of our regular members with us. I see we have Dr. Scott, Kayvon, Mauricio, and Surfer Bob. I think this must be Surfer Bob's first time. I don't recognize the name. Surfer Bob, if you don't mind letting us know where you're joining in from. It's obviously somewhere where there's water. All right. It's good to have you all with us. Those of you that are not familiar with the format, we're going to speak about one of Lord Chaitanya's associates. Can't hear so well. Okay, we'll take care of that, Scott. We're going to speak about one of Lord Chaitanya's associates, and then we'll do questions and answers at the end of the hour. We're going to work on that sound, so give us just a second here. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, I should keep talking so we know the sound's going. All right.
Okay, we'll just stop broadcasting for a second, and we'll get right back on.
I'll tell him.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we had to reset the voice. So we're going to stop broadcasting just for a second. You'll get a blank screen, and then we're going to pick it right back up just to reset the feed. So bear with us just a moment. Haribo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh, that looks better.
Okay.
The sound's way up there.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Alrighty. Okay, Hare Krishna, we're back. Scott, tell me if that's any better. Let me know. Okay, you're my ears on the other side of the camera there. All right, so tonight, I'm just waiting till we get a little feedback from one of you, Scott or Mauricio, whatever. Oh, much better. Good, good. Okay, thank you, thank you. All right, Prabhu. So this evening, actually, first I want to mention a particular thing. We hear sometimes the use of the word parishads, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's parishads. And what this refers to, if we break that word up, the pari are the extensions, and the ashads, the friends. So it means the friends, the men, the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, now in one sense, we're all the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But in this specific case, it means those that are close to him, those that are his associates. So, Mahaprabhu has many associates, as we've been discussing. Abai and I were just discussing that as we've been reading about for some 30 weeks or so now, Mahaprabhu has many associates. But some of these associates are very, very intimate. Now, how is it possible to describe these intimate associates? Only by the mercy of the Vaishnavas and by the blessings of the devotees. So we get those blessings and those that ability by keeping the association with devotees. So in this way, by the association of Vaishnavas, I've been asked to take up this task of what I'm performing here. And so that's what we're doing. And tonight, we're going to speak about Svarupa Damodara Goswami. It's clearly stated that in the entire creation, in the entire world, there were 3 people that were very intimate and close and understood clearly the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of those was Svarupa Damodara Goswami. The second was Ramananda Roy. And the third was Sikhi Mahiti. These 3 personalities were the 3 most intimate associates of the Lord. They are considered by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami to be the most important of the Lord's associates. And that in that group, one of them, namely Svarupa Damodara Goswami, as well as Paramananda Puri, were considered the 2 devotees that clearly understood the mind and the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that clearly understood what his internal feelings were. So Krishnadas Kaviraj explains that he has given the understanding of what Mahaprabhu's mission is, what his purpose, his external reason for manifesting, but that there's another internal reason that he explains. And this internal reason deals with the Lord's wanting to be able to taste the different types of rasas. We know that Krishna is the foremost enjoyer of the different rasas and the different relationships with the devotees. And the purpose in Mahaprabhu coming, Mahaprabhu came with the specific external manifestation, if you will, of the mood and the appearance of Srimati Radharani. That desire of wanting to always understand Krishna and love Krishna and be with Krishna, and the bodily color of Srimati Radharani as well. So, in this way, Svarupa Damodara is understood to be like her, like Mahaprabhu's alter ego. Srimati Radharani had her alter egos, Lalita, Vishaka, like that complemented her and enhanced her mood according to what was needed. And this was the activity of Svarupa Damodara Goswami. That he was there to enhance and complement the mood. Now, he wasn't alone in that, but in this particular mood. We find that it's described by Kavi Karnapur, who we've spoken about many times. That Kavi Karnapur mentions in his Gaura Gonadesha Dipika that Vishaka has become Svarupa Damodara for the purpose of enhancing the pastimes of Srimati Radhika. Now, when Mahaprabhu spent his final 12 years living in Jagannath Puri, during that time, this is when these three most intimate associates were there. Particularly so, Ramananda Roy and Svarupa Damodar. Ramananda Roy was expert. He was the, how shall we say, like the manifestation of the external manifestation of one mood of the Lord, and Svarupa Damodar was the external manifestation of another mood. So they both were very complementary. Ramananda Roy would recite different types of verses from Chandidas, from Vidyapati, from the Gita Govinda, Jayadev Goswami's Gita Govinda. So these would be different expertise of Ramananda Roy in reciting. We've spoken about it. Svarupa Damodar's expertise was knowing the right kind of kirtan, the right type of bhajan, the right type of devotional songs to sing that would enhance those moods as well. It also mentions further that, I mentioned Paramananda Puri, there's a little description of the four main rasas that Mahaprabhu was tasting, that his intention to heighten, if you will, four primary specific rasas that he was interested in. One of these was the Vatsalya rasa, the parental. And this was exemplified in his relationship with Paramananda Puri. That Paramananda Puri was the embodiment of this parental rasa. Now this is all during his pastimes in Jagannath Puri, as he is beginning the latter part of his Leela. And Ramananda Roy was the manifestation of pure friendship. And then there was Govinda Das. Of course, we know Govinda Das was the Lord's personal servant in his final years and throughout much of his time there in Jagannath Puri. And Govinda Das manifested this understanding of the dasya, the relationship of servitude. Then there were three personalities it mentions, and that is Gadadhar, Jagadananda, and Svarupa Damodar. And these three personalities, they were the manifestation of the Madhurya Ras, this highest relationship of Radha and Krishna, of understanding this separation, and understanding this hankering for the Lord, and this desire to constantly be with Him like that. So these were the personalities that were very intimately involved in these different rasas or relationships with the Lord. Now, how do we know these pastimes that took place? We know that Murari Gupta was a very close friend, we've discussed previously, was a very close friend of Jagannath Mishra. And that he was there through all of the Navadvipa Leela when Mahaprabhu was younger. And when Mahaprabhu was born, and when he was younger, and when he was in his middle pastimes through all the Navadvip and Mayapur like that, these activities are recorded by Murari Gupta, and he turned these over to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and others. Predominantly, this was what was used, and we find our Gora Leelas, the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Mangala, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita are based on these types of sources. Chaitanya Charitamrita, specifically in this regards, but the later half of the Lord's pastimes in Puri, these were all recorded by Svarupa Damodara. Now, Svarupa Damodara recorded these, and we'll get a little later how it happened that he and Raghunath Das, but he instructed all these to Raghunath Das. He recorded them but didn't write them. He mentally recorded them, and then he gave them to Raghunath Das Goswami to write down. He forced Raghunath Das Goswami. Of course, I'm sure Raghunath Das Goswami was a very eager participant in the process. And so he wrote them down. Then Raghunath Das Goswami turned these over to Krishnadas Kaviraj. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami compiled them in the Chaitanya Charitamrita for the purpose of sharing them with all the devotees at large. So Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Puri, recorded by Svarupa Damodara, instructed to Raghunath Das Goswami, given to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and disseminated to the devotees at large. So this is the 5 steps in that process of how we understand these pastimes. And it describes that these pastimes of the Lord that Svarupa Damodara had were like valuable jewels he kept in a storehouse. And he made them into a necklace and put them around the neck of Raghunath Das Goswami. And then Raghunath Das Goswami shared that necklace with Krishnadas Kaviraj. So very, very poetic like that. But in this way we see that they had a very systematic method in which these pastimes were recorded, and in this way distributed and given to everyone. Now, we mentioned a little bit about Svarupa Damodara's kirtan ability. He knew exactly how to make Mahaprabhu very, very happy, or how to enhance the mood of separation, depending on what the case was. As we mentioned Ramananda Roy in the same way. Ramananda Roy knew exactly what verses to speak, and Svarupa Damodara knew exactly what kirtan, what bhajan, what song to sing that would complement the mood that the Lord had. It mentions that these songs, as I mentioned earlier, of Chandidas and Vidyapati and Jaidev Goswami, not only were they spoken in verse, but they could also be sung. So they could be spoken in verse format or sung either way according to the need. And it describes that Svarupa Damodara was like a Gandharva in his musical abilities. Sometimes we say, oh, did you hear the kirtan today? So-and-so has a voice like a Gandharva. Now, of course, if we really heard a Gandharva's voice and then went back and heard that kirtan, we might not think it was just like a Gandharva. But for the sake of our appreciation, we have superlatives like that. But the fact of the matter is that Svarupa Damodara did have the abilities of a Gandharva when it came to his musical skills. And it mentions that his knowledge of scripture was equal to that of Brihaspati. Of course, we know Brihaspati is very, very famous. Prabhupada said one time there was one of his disciples, very long story and not such a complimentary story, but at any rate very humorous. He mentioned one time, yes, that disciple so-and-so was blessed by Brihaspati. So someone that has great knowledge and learning, sometimes they're described like that. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives a very nice description in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahaprabhu was appreciating the activities of Svarupa and Ramananda. And it mentions that Mahaprabhu reached up and put his hands on both their shoulders, embracing them. So you can imagine the picture in your mind's eye. Mahaprabhu is standing there, and in front of him is Svarupa and Ramananda Roy, very humbly either reciting or singing or just having satisfied the Lord. And the Lord reaches up and puts his hands on both their shoulders, embracing them. And he says, tell me, my dear Prabhus, what should I do? Where should I go in order to find Krishna? You can tell me the best thing that I should do. You are my best associates. So in this way, he would tell his tale of woe and his feeling of separation and his mood of anxiety to Ramananda and Svarupa, and then they would complement it, according to what was necessary. And so in this way, they were intimately connected and inseparable from the later pastimes of Mahaprabhu and Chaitanya Puri. Now, one may think, well, Krishnadas Kaviraj received this from Sanatana Goswami, therefore he's, from Svarupa Damodara. Therefore he's speaking very highly of Svarupa Damodara. After all, it was his friend and he gave him, the information came that way, so he's just giving some extra praise there. One may think like that. Prabhupada, those of you that are familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada mentions like that when Arjuna is glorifying Krishna. Param Brahma Pavitram, saying he's the King of Kings, that you're the Lord of Lords, you're the most pure, you're, like that, there's that verse. And so Prabhupada says in the purport, one shouldn't mistake that because Krishna is Arjuna's friend, that therefore Arjuna is just giving some flowery words. Because then Prabhupada mentions that so-and-so, all these great sages, and he gives a list, a very wonderful verse in the Gita. So in the same way, we might think, well, Krishnadas Kaviraj is obliged to Raghunath, who was obliged to Svarupa Damodara, therefore he's speaking. No, we shouldn't think like that, because even Vrindavan Das Thakur, in his Chaitanya Bhagavat, now his Chaitanya Bhagavat was not based upon the writings of Svarupa Damodara entirely. So in this way, Vrindavan Das Thakur also describes Svarupa Damodara's ability to bring Mahaprabhu to an incredible height of ecstatic devotion. Excuse me. Mentions that when Mahaprabhu was there in Puri, he would go to the Tota Gopinath temple and he would hear the speaking of the Bhagavat of Gadadhar. We know Gadadhar was very expert for speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he would speak the Bhagavatam, and Mahaprabhu would become completely filled with ecstasy. Now, just across from the Tota Gopinath temple, if you go there now, these huge sand dunes, which Mahaprabhu would sometimes lose himself on in ecstasy, mistaking them to be Govardhan Hill. They're a bit high. I've been on top of them. They're not off limits. They're not like Govardhan Hill that you can't climb on them. Mahaprabhu would go there after hearing the speaking of Gadadhar Pandit's Bhagavat, like that. Now, one very interesting point. Gadadhar Pandit primarily, not exclusively, but primarily spoke from the part of the Srimad Bhagavatam that deals with the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. Now here in Alachua, we just recently finished the 7th canto. Some very, very amazing instructions in the activities there. And elsewhere, I've been listening online to some lectures of Indradrumna Maharaj, who's in Australia, and they're in the 4th canto, which is the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj. And if you listen to these two pastimes, the instructions given are very, very wonderful, very exacting, and very, very helpful for the devotee trying to advance in devotional service. So this was the section Gadadhar would mostly speak from. And Mahaprabhu would be overcome by that, and the complement to that, as I mentioned, would be the kirtans of Svarupa Damodara. So in this way, these three devotees had an amazing ability to help with that mood that Mahaprabhu was always anxious and eager to develop. So, what do we know about the early life of Svarupa Damodara? Excuse me. Excuse me. Svarupa Damodara was born in what we now call Bangladesh. He was born along the banks of the Brahmaputra River. There was a village there that he was raised in. And interesting little background there is that his father's name was Padmagarbha Acharya. And Padmagarbha Acharya married the daughter of Jairam Chakravarti. And Jairam Chakravarti's daughter, Jairam Chakravarti had moved to Mayapur. After taking care of his daughters and getting them married, he moved to Navadvip properly. And so Padmagarbha Acharya and his wife also moved to Navadvip to be with the family. And shortly thereafter, the son was born. The son's name was Purushottamacharya. Actually, Purushottam Bhattacharya, to be exact. But he was called by both. Purushottam Acharya, Purushottam Bhattacharya, called, of course, Purushottam. And I'm sure some of his buddies had shorter names than that for him. You know how we do that with each other as friends. So, in this way, he grew up. Now, once the child was born, it mentions that, excuse me, Padma Garbha Acharya immediately left. And he placed the mother and the baby in care of the maternal grandparents, the mother's grandparents, and then he went off. He went to Matila, to Kashi, and absorbed himself in studying scripture, and did not return home. Now, of course, sometimes this happens, and according to what the result is, according to what the pastime of the Lord is, this may be the case. So, at any rate, this is how Purushottamacharya ended up being raised by his grandparents in Navadvip, and became an early associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After Mahaprabhu took sannyas, Mahaprabhu wasn't able to stay in Navadvip. It mentions that there's an internal and an external reason. Internally, Mahaprabhu moved to Puri because he wanted to be closer to his Lord. He was feeling great separation from Lord Jagannath and wanted to reside with him. Externally, he took it as his mother's desire, because as a sannyasi, he could no longer live in the village of his upbringing, where he was raised, where his mother was, and his ex-wife, and like that. But his mother didn't want him traveling away so far, so she requested, please stay in Puri. Because by staying in Jagannath Puri, devotees will go back and forth for Rath Yatra regularly, and then when they go, I'll be able to hear some information about your well-being, how you're doing, and like that. So, and plus messengers between the two is not so difficult. So Mahaprabhu agreed to that. So for these two reasons, he went to reside in Puri. Now, after leaving Navadvip and going to Puri, Purushottam Bhattacharya could not stand the pain of separation anymore. It was just too much for him. So he left, and he went to Benares. And in Benares, he took sannyas. Like Mahaprabhu, he didn't take Vaisnava sannyas, if you will, to describe it like that. He didn't take it in the way that we know sannyas now. Particularly, the name Svarupa Damodara is a brahmachari name. There's a long description given of different names according to brahmachari and a sannyasi, and what ashram you come from, and what particular ashram you're living in, and what the last name, like that. It's the explanation is there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But in this particular case, his sannyas guru, Chaitanya Ananda Bharati, gave him the name Svarupa Damodara. Now, he gave up the Sikha. He gave up not carrying a danda, and in this way abandoned these things, simply for the sake of taking sannyas. He was feeling greatly the separation from Mahaprabhu. All right, Mahaprabhu's taken sannyas, so I'll take sannyas. So he went to Benares. He met with this Chaitanya Ananda Bhattacharya, took sannyas from him, got the name Svarupa Damodara. And then his enthusiasm for worshipping Sri Krishna began to manifest even more. And so some people consider that this kind of madness was what actually prompted him to take sannyas. But internally, of course, it was his desire to place himself close to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then he took permission in Benares from his sannyas guru, Chaitanya Ananda Bharati, to please let me go to Nilachala, because there I'll be able to associate with Lord Jagannath. And so he gave him that, and the Lord, his guru, but yes, you go, not a problem. You go on and continue like that. So in this way, excuse me. In this way, he arrived there, and entering into Jagannath Puri, immediately sought out Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a very, very nice description of his arriving in Puri. It mentions that Mahaprabhu took sannyas on the full moon in the month of Magh. And in the following month, he left for Nilachala. And of course, along the way, we know he delivered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then after delivering Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he went to South India and traveled all the places in South India. He stayed there during the Chaturmasya season and delivered Vyankata Bhatta, Gopal Bhatta, Prabhupada Saraswati, that whole family, and many other personalities. On that trip, of course, he was traveling with the Brahmin Kala Krishna Das. This was a devotee given to him to see to his needs and travel with him like that. And Nityananda sent when Kala Krishna Das back to Navadvip after the Lord returned to inform the devotees that Mahaprabhu was now back in Puri. And this is the point at which Svarupa Damodara then immediately came and left to join the Lord in Nilachala. So in arriving there, there's a very nice prayer here. Let me just pull this. When Svarupa Damodara first arrived in Puri and came before the darshan of the Lord, he offered the following prayer. O ocean of mercy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, may your auspicious mercy arise like the dawn, driving away all kinds of material lamentation, making everything pure and awakening transcendental bliss, ending all quarrels and disagreements among different species, giving the taste of spiritual life, and maddening the minds of those who surrender to you, constantly giving the intoxicating joy of devotional service, and revealing the extent of the conjugal mood of sweetness. So this is the prayer from Svarupa Damodara. Now, when he, it's actually amazing, when he first came before the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced him. Now, we've read different devotees that Mahaprabhu gave his embrace to. And if we just stop for a moment and think about that, what an amazing embrace that is. It's quite common that we give a hug to each other. We say, oh, Jai Har Prabhupada, we'll give a big hug. Sometimes we see someone we haven't seen in a bit. I just met one devotee today that's been away from the community here in Alachua for a couple of months. I was so happy to see him, gave him a big hug. When I go to Vrindavan, you see a devotee you haven't seen in, maybe a year or more. Oh, Prabhu! Very heartfelt feeling. This is a symbol of exchanging affection between devotees. Now imagine the degree of affection Mahaprabhu felt for his associates, what to speak of his most intimate associates. And then that embrace that the Lord would give. How much incredible devotion must have been in that. So really, really quite wonderful. So when that happened, then what happened is that the Lord then, after embracing him, stepped back and said the following thing to Svarupa Damodara. He said, today I had a dream that you were arriving. And everything was made just right by that dream. Just as one who is blind becomes filled with great joy upon seeing, so now I am happy to be able to see you. And Svarupa Damodara responded, he said, oh my Lord, he said, please forgive me. Forgetting you, I deserted your lotus feet. Not having a trace of prema within me, I left your service, and being sinful, I went to a foreign land. He's indicating here, of course, his having left Navadvip and gone to Benares, which is in a different state, so to speak. But although I abandoned you, you did not abandon me. By the ropes of your mercy, you have bound me by the neck and have dragged me back to your lotus feet. So Svarupa Damodara offered these words of humility to the Lord, and the Lord again embraced Svarupa Damodara, saying to him, Sri Krishna is very kind. By his mercy, once again, we have been brought together. Very, very wonderful exchange here between these two incredibly fortunate devotees. So, in this way, Svarupa Damodara is there. Ramananda Roy comes a bit later with Prataparudra Maharaj, and there's the whole opportunity for the different rasas and relationships to begin to develop in the pastimes there in Jagannath Puri. Now, of course, these devotees, they were real personalities. They were real individuals, and they had lives of their own. And thus they had certain people they were very friendly with. Svarupa Damodara, one of his closest friends, outside of that immediate circle there, Mahaprabhu, one of his closest friends was Pundarik Vidhanidhi. And we've spoken about Pundarik Vidhanidhi before. Actually, excuse me, we see many of the pastimes of Pundarik Vidhanidhi are intertwined with the pastimes of many other devotees. Devananda Pandit, Vakreshwar Pandit, Gadadhar, and here's Svarupa Damodar. It mentions that there's the one pastime you'll remember from Chaitanya Charitamrita, the water sport pastimes. That when the devotees would go to Indradumna Sarovara, this big, huge lake, beautiful, beautiful lake with wonderful steps around it, and a walkway that goes out to a large platform in the middle where they would put the boats and then put the deities on those boats and take them out. All of that's still there if you go to Puri. Excuse me. This was during the pastimes of Chandan Yatra. So the devotees would then get into the water and have water sports and play. This is still, you see the devotees when they go to Mayapur, they get into the Ganga and they play very enthusiastically. Mahaprabhu encouraged this. And of course we have the famous pastimes of Nityananda and Advaita Acharya splashing like that. So in the same way, Svarupa Damodar and Pundarik Vidhanidhi were two people during this water sport pastime in Indradumna Sarovara that were splashing each other very enthusiastically, very joyously as two wonderful friends. Now, in Jagannath Puri, there's a festival. We just passed it a short time ago. It's called the Odana Shasti. And this is a time at which what happens is it becomes a bit cold. It's the winter season. And so the pujaris, they dress the Lord in this type of starched cloth. Now, it's not starched in the way that we know starch here in the West. A little spray can of, what's it called, Niagara Falls spray starch, but it's a tapioca base. It's a food-based type of starch, and it makes the cloth quite stiff. So this type of cloth is offered to the Lord by the pujaris at a certain time of year. And Pundarik Vidhanidhi didn't care for the behavior of this. Pundarik Vidhanidhi was very well versed in different activities of puja. And he questioned, he said, how is it the pujaris? He said, everyone knows that this tapioca starched cloth is considered not clean. That's why before, just like when you go to Vrindavan or Mayapur and you buy a dhoti, you open it up and it stands up straight on its own. You can stand it on the floor and it stands because it's got this heavy starch in it. So, of course, nowadays there's some chemical. But at any rate, so in this way, the cloth is washed several times, and then you can wear it, and it's a nice, comfortable dhoti like that. You can sit very nicely. So, Pundarik Vidhanidhi was criticizing. He said, this, how is this unclean starch being given to the Lord? And Svarupa Damodar laughed. He said, the Lord Jagannath, the Supreme Personality of God, he's completely independent. He said, what is it to him, clean cloth or unclean cloth? Everything is his creation, therefore he accepts it. Pundarik Vidhanidhi said, yes, I know that. Svarupa Damodar continued, he said, and besides that, he said, the fact of the matter is that Lord Jagannath is not beholding to the smarta rules and regulations of puja. Pundarik Vidhanidhi said, yes, I accept that Lord Jagannath is completely independent. There's no question of that. Lord Jagannath doesn't have to follow any. But does this mean that the pujaris are free from following rules and regulations? They are not independent of Scripture. They are not independent of regulations for puja. So how is it they are, they are not the supreme Daru Brahman, that they can do anything and dress the Lord in unwashed cloth. So, if you even touch that cloth, you're supposed to clean your hands. So yet they're taking it and putting it on the Lord. How is this? So anyway, they were debating like this, and Svarupa Damodar wasn't taking it very seriously. That night, Pundarik Vidhanidhi took his rest, and in his dream, Lord Jagannath and Lord Balaram came. And they said, Pundarik, you're criticizing our Sevites? You're criticizing those who are actually engaged in the worship of us? Those that we bring to engage in our service? This is not appropriate for you to do. This is not the proper behavior of a Vaishnava to criticize. Haridas Thakur makes a nice point on this. He mentions that, excuse me, Haridas Thakur mentions that sometimes persons will criticize devotees. And even in a devotee community, even in a Vaishnava community, this type of criticism sometimes goes on. And he says that the nature of criticism is like a fly that always goes to the sore. He says, but, he says, instead, the devotee should be like the honeybee that always goes to the honey, like that. So, in this way, Lord Jagannath was criticizing Pundarik Vidyanidhi. And so, because he was not happy with Pundarik Vidyanidhi, he began to slap him on the cheeks. Lord Jagannath and Balaram slapping Pundarik Vidyanidhi one side and the other like that. Not probably such a hard slap, but, in this way, giving some, stop behaving foolishly. Sometimes how you do when you're raising a child. Behave yourself, like that. But of course, Lord Jagannath is Daru Brahman. He's the wooden Lord. So this was leaving some marks. So the next morning when Pundarik Vidyanidhi woke up, he felt his cheeks and they were swollen and they were red. They were swollen and red. So in this way, he was embarrassed to go out. But Svarupa Damodara, he came anyway because they were friendly, and he stopped. And Svarupa Damodara saw him and he said, what is this that has happened to you? How is this taking place? He said, so anyway, he revealed, they're close friends, he revealed to him what happened. That Lord Jagannath had come in a dream and punished him in this way. So Svarupa Damodara said, I've never heard or seen this type of punishment by Lord Jagannath. How is it that the Lord has personally come to chastise you in this way in your dream? You are therefore the most fortunate personality. You should not consider yourself unfortunate. You are the most fortunate personality. So in this way their friendship was deepened by this particular activity of Pundarik's criticism of the pujaris of Lord Jagannath and his resultant punishment from Lord Jagannath himself. So we should be very cautious if we think we have some criticism of the pujaris in whatever temple or community we're living in, because it just might be that the Lord will come and punish us. Now, Svarupa Damodara Goswami, the one of the main Leelas that we're known about, one of the main Leelas that are known in Jagannath Puri is the Ratha Yatra. And there are many activities leading up to and in front of and at the other end of, behind the Ratha Yatra. And one of these particular activities is called the Gundisha Marjana. Gundisha Marjana is an activity by which the temple, when Lord Jagannath leaves his main temple, he travels, and there's a temple where he resides for some time. And this is understood in the spiritual esoteric terms that he's leaving Dwarka and returning to Vrindavan. So when he goes to the Gundisha, before going there, the temple, which only gets used once a year for this purpose, needs to be thoroughly cleansed. And so there's a great, great festival held called Gundisha Marjan, the cleansing of the Gundisha temple. And Mahaprabhu organized all the devotees very enthusiastically. This is described in great and glorious detail in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Nityananda, Dvaita, Sarup, Brahmananda, Parmananda Puri, all of these devotees, as well as many, many other devotees, carried buckets and buckets and buckets of water for the cleansing. Actually, I'll tell a funny story on myself in this regards. When I was a very young brahmachari, I think I'd only been in the temple, I don't know, less than 6 months. And we lived in one of those wood frame temples that all temples are in the old days before we got all these beautiful buildings we're in now, just, regular brownstone. And I had read about the Gundisha Marjana and how the devotees would bring buckets of water and throw it and clean everything. And I don't know, maybe I was a little less than, sharp. Maybe I was carrying some leftover residue from my previous activities as a hippie. But I wasn't thinking so clearly. I was thinking, oh, this is the way the Lord cleans. So into the temple room, I brought, where the wood floor and the drywall and the wooden windows, buckets of water, and began to throw the buckets of water. Well, this quickly seeped through the floor and dripped into the basement and was a mess there. And then the wooden windows didn't work, so it was really quite a unfortunate circumstance. But at any rate, so in these days, the Gundisha temple was all stone. Marble, stone, granite, like that. And they would cleanse like that, throw buckets of water and sweep it out in this way. Very, very nice standard of cleaning. So now, during the cleansing of the Gundisha temple, the Bengali devotees had come, of course, from Mayapur, from Navadvip. This is, as we've mentioned several times, Shivananda Singh would organize all the devotees from the Navadvip, Bengal area to come and travel to Orissa for the Rath Yatra activities. And so at that time, Mahaprabhu kind of put the Bengali devotees, he would refer to them as Svarupa Damodar's devotees. He would put them under Svarupa Damodar's charge. So in this cleansing process, Lord Chaitanya is there in the temple, and he's on the temple throne cleaning, and devotees are throwing buckets of water and cleansing and wiping down. And one of the Bengali brahmacharis came, and as the water's coming, poured the water off of the foot of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and kept that water and took it. Mahaprabhu did not like this very much. He turned to Svarupa Damodar, "You're a Bengali man." He described him like that. He said, "You just not know what is the proper behavior." Mahaprabhu didn't like this, that in the effort of cleansing the Lord's temple, someone was taking the water from his feet. Internally, the Lord was very satisfied by the behavior of this devotee. But externally, he wanted to show that this is not the proper behavior. So, in this way, he did not appreciate that. So this was one of the Gundisha pastimes where Svarupa Damodar is particularly mentioned in this way. Excuse me. And then, of course, there's the Rath Yatra festival itself. I don't know how many of you in our listening audience and how many of those in our chat room here, whether it be Rasa Rasika or Madhurya Leelananda or Bhaktin Carol or Surfer Bob, or any of you that have had the opportunity to go to Jagannath Puri for the Rath Yatra. I myself have not had the opportunity either. But I know many devotees that have, and it's an amazing experience. You can imagine how much more amazing it would be during the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Mahaprabhu himself was there, and all of his associates were broken up, 7 kirtan groups. Nityananda leading this one, Haridas dancing here, Vakreshwar dancing there, this one dancing there, this one playing drums there, that one playing kartals there. And Mahaprabhu, amazingly, in every kirtan group. And each kirtan group thought, "Oh, we're so fortunate, Mahaprabhu's in our kirtan group." So this was going on like that. And one of these kirtan groups, Svarupa Damodar, was the singer. As we mentioned, he was expert in kirtan. So when you've got a great program, you pick your best kirtan leaders. So Svarupa Damodar was leading one of these kirtan groups. And in this particular group, Advaitacharya was the dancer. So Svarupa Damodar is leading the kirtan, Advaitacharya is dancing, and of course Mahaprabhu is there dancing, and everyone thinks that he's only in their group, so he's dancing in this group. So in this way, all the different kirtan parties were going on, and Svarupa Damodar was singing in this way. The devotees from Shantipur had one kirtan group, the devotees from Shrikanda had another kirtan group, the devotees from Kaliagram had another kirtan group. Each had their particular mood, and very, very ecstatic like that. So Mahaprabhu would dance in such an ecstatic way that no one could keep up with him. It mentioned he was like a firebrand. All of his pastimes and all of his ecstasy were manifested completely during these Rath Yatras. And the different kirtan singers, in this case we're mentioning Svarupa Damodar, the different kirtan singers would know how by their kirtan to enhance the Lord's mood. So if the Lord was dancing in a particular style, then they would follow that. If the Lord was dancing very ecstatically, they would follow. And they would be able to increase these different moods that way. So Excuse me. This was the pastimes that went on during the Ratha Yatra Leela of Mahaprabhu. When Mahaprabhu was staying there in Jagannath Puri, as I mentioned, there were these 3 devotees that understood his mood, and he was quite particular that others did not really get that opportunity to understand the inner meaning of his activities. As we know from his pastimes in Navadvip, he didn't allow people to call him the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He didn't want to be addressed in that way. And so he was quite confidential about these higher rasas of his activities in his Leela. Mentions that the Lord had a particular verse that he would recite over and over and over again, and that Svarupa Damodara was the only one that could understand this verse. And Svarupa Damodara did not share this with anyone. Now, Mahaprabhu at one time was visiting the residence of Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Goswami lived, as you may remember, just outside of Jagannath Puri, just outside of Orissa, had a thatched hut out there. And Rupa Goswami had heard the Lord reciting this verse. And so he composed a verse which revealed the deeper meanings of the Lord in that way. So, in other words, Mahaprabhu recited this verse, and it gave him a certain satisfaction and spiritual ecstasy. And then Svarupa Damodara understood the meaning of that, and that aided in Mahaprabhu's pastimes. But Rupa Goswami had heard the Lord recite that verse and understood a deeper meaning and explained that, wrote it out. But he didn't want to show it to anyone. So he stuck it was in a palm leaf, he stuck it in the roof of his cottage. Mahaprabhu came to visit Rupa Goswami, and he saw that, oh, here is this palm leaf, and he pulled it out, and he read it. And when Rupa Goswami turned and saw he was reading it, Rupa Goswami immediately fell to the floor like a stick, offering those obeisances to the Lord. And the Lord got up, and it says he gave Rupa Goswami a slap. Gave him a slap. How merciful that must have been. And then after doing that, he gave him a big embrace. And he said, no one knows the purport to this verse. How could you understand the intention in this verse? Mahaprabhu bestowed various blessings on Rupa Goswami from his having this deep appreciation like that. And then he took that verse and he showed it to Svarupa Damodara. So in this way, this exchange back and forth was heightened. And he said, Mahaprabhu said to Svarupa Damodara, he said, if Rupa Goswami can understand this verse, it must be due to your special blessings upon him. So in this way, we see that these intimate associates of the Lord, they did sometimes share this mercy with other devotees according to their qualification. And of course, who could be more qualified than Rupa Goswami? We want to, we're closing up on the top of the hour here. I want to speak about one other friend of Svarupa Damodara's. His name was Bhagavanacharya. Bhagavanacharya was an interesting guy. He was lame. And lame meaning he had some crippled, And but he was a writer and a speaker. A great devotee, a scholar, and it mentions he was a man of very refined habits. In other words, he was a gentleman, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would explain. And so he came to Jagannath Puri to be with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates at that time. And his dealings with Svarupa Damodara, they were like that of a close friend. And the reason was because during the Krishna Leela pastimes, Bhagavanacharya was a cowherd boy. It doesn't particularly mention which cowherd boy, but he was a cowherd boy, and he was a close associate of Svarupa Damodara, who was Vishaka, in enhancing the activities of the Lord's pastimes.
Very interesting.
So, interesting relationship there. So, he was completely surrendered to the Lord, and occasionally he would get invited to wherever the Lord was having his meals to take prasadam at that time. So he was known as being very, very generous and unpretentious in his nature, Bhagavanacharya. But the problem was that his father was not necessarily like that. His father's name was Satananda Khan, and he had a brother whose name was Gopal Bhattacharya. Satananda Khan was a complete materialistically minded person, and Gopal Bhattacharya was a complete Mayavadi. So we see sometimes the devotee of the Lord will come from a family that does not necessarily share the same characteristics. We saw that in the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, on his mother's side, they were not so much devotees. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So, Gopal Bhattacharya, he came to Jagannath Puri, and in a very simple and straightforward way, he asked Bhagavanacharya and Svarupa Damodara to arrange to have him speak to the Lord about the Vedanta Bhasya, Shankaracharya's Vedanta Bhasya. So Bhagavanacharya asked Svarupa Damodara, he said, my brother would like to, speak like this. He's come, and I request you please hear from him. Because one thing that Svarupa Damodara would do was he would hear different pastimes, different writings, different presentations that were being made for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and decide if they were going to get past him, so to speak. So Svarupa Damodara was actually a bit angry at this. Had this upstart young boy come and speak this Veda. But, he had this great love for Bhagavanacharya. He said, my dear friend Bhagavan, he said, you have lost your intelligence in the association of your brother Gopal. This is a polite way of saying you're a fool. Because you have lost your intelligence in the association of your brother Gopal. And now you're eager to hear the Mayavadi philosophy, and you're eager for others to hear it. When a Vaishnava listens to this Mayavadi philosophy, his devotional service becomes completely contaminated. The Mayavadi philosophy is so dangerous that even a highly elevated devotee listens to it and becomes polluted by hearing this. Now, Bhagavanacharya said, how is this? My dear friend Svarupa, that we're all very fixed devotees at the lotus feet of the Lord. Simply by hearing, it'll make my brother happy that he got to speak. And simply by hearing this, how will we become, influenced? We're all very fixed devotees of the Lord. It's not going to change our minds. Svarupa Damodara cautioned him. He said, nevertheless, when we hear the Mayavadi philosophy, when we hear that Brahman is only spiritual reality and that the universe of Maya is false, we gain no spiritual understanding from such hearing. Now this is an important point. Svarupa Damodara is instructing here that if one is going to sit down and listen for the purpose of spiritual benefit, the subject matter should be proper. Otherwise it's a waste of time. One doesn't get the spiritual benefit. It says when a devotee hears the Mayavadi philosophy, that the living entity is only imaginary, and that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a manifestation of ignorance, it breaks his heart and his spiritual life. Now this is mentioned, this warning is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this was completely, restricted. It just was not allowed. In the same way, Svarupa Damodara would prevent anybody that came forward with rasa bhasa, conflicting moods in the process of devotional service. This is a subtle point in Krishna consciousness, but there are certain moods that you don't mix. And so anybody that would come with this improper mixing of moods, Svarupa Damodara wouldn't allow them to go before the Lord. So here again, Bhagavanacharya, it appears that Bhagavanacharya had a weak spot for this type of stuff. So there was one poet from Bengal that had written a play. And he presented it to Bhagavanacharya, and Bhagavanacharya brought it and wanted to present it, and asked Svarupa Damodara, you please read it and give your opinion on it. So, because it was understood, if Svarupa Damodara reads this and gives his approval, then it will be presented to Mahaprabhu, and it will, be given a stamp of approval in this way. But, and many of the Vaishnavas that had heard it, he praised the literary qualities of this play anyway, so it was given to Svarupa Damodara, and he finally agreed to read it after repeatedly being asked, because Svarupa Damodara could understand this. He finally agreed after repeatedly being asked. So when he read it, he found numerous faults in the manuscript. And he demonstrated how it contradicted the Vaishnava Dharma. And when he saw the distress of the poet, he became a little bit compassionate. Now this again also, Bhakti and Carol, I'll answer your question as soon as we're finished here. I see she's got a question here. This is one of the amazing qualities of a Vaishnava, is that in his efforts to instruct, to correct, to even chastise someone, they do it in such a way that that person doesn't feel completely discouraged. Because if you correct or chastise or instruct someone in such a way that they're totally discouraged, then what is the point? You have to do it in such a way that they realize their mistake but stay enlivened in the process of devotional service. This is why 5th canto of the Bhagavatam instructs that unless you can do this, you shouldn't become responsible personality, guru, teacher, father, so on and so on and so on like that. So, now, another thing about this Bhagavanacharya, that when Chota Haridas went begging rice, it was Bhagavanacharya's elder sister, and quite elder as the story goes, that he begged the rice from, and when begging the rice at the door, engaged in conversation with her about this, that, and the other. And this is the source of this chastisement of Junior Haridas. At any rate, so in this way, I'm sorry, I skipped this part, but after seeing that the poet was discouraged, Svarupa Damodara encouraged him. He told him, he said, you go and study the Bhagavat from a Vaishnava. After studying in this way, you take exclusive shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then always associate with the devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by that, all your misconceptions will be corrected. So the poet felt very satisfied, and in this way he was able to stay enlivened about associating with the Lord, but at the same time get his misunderstandings corrected. So we're going to take a break here for a second because Bhakti and Carol has asked a question which I don't want to get too far ahead of because it's in my references here. But she's asked where in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it's noted that the Mayavadi interpretation breaks the heart, and like what I was quoting there. And that verse is in the I hope you have your pencil ready, Bhakti and Carol. It's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita 3:2, 92 to 99. So that'd be the 3rd volume, 2nd chapter, verse 92 to 99. And I would imagine that's in the Antya-lila, because this is dealing with the later pastimes. Possibly the later, no, if it's only the 2nd, yeah, it's got to be in the Antya-lila. So 3rd volume of the Antya-lila, I guess that's, at any rate, 2nd chapter, and it's verse 92 to 99. So there's the answer for you. Rasa Rasika is mentioning here, we're talking about offenses to devotees, and he's wondering about subtle mental offenses. Is there still a reaction for this? Rasa Rasika, fortunately for me, we're in the Kali Yuga and we're not held responsible for the activities of the mind. Because my mind is always everywhere. As is the case with all of us. It's one of the symptoms of the Kali Yuga individuals, that we are very much bewildered by the mind. But we should understand, even though we're not held responsible, for instance, if I go up to a devotee and I kick that devotee, nonsense, it's quite a reaction. I verbally abused him and I've kicked him. But if I just think in my mind, this devotee's a nonsense, I may not get the reaction for it, but that certainly doesn't do any good to foster my devotional mood for the association of Vaishnavas. Now, Haridas Thakur again, he describes that there are 4 types of devotees. those devotees that we take instruction from, those who are our seniors, those devotees who are our contemporaries, that we reveal our mind to and accept them revealing their mind to us, those devotees who are our juniors that we give guidance and instruction and shelter to, and those devotees that we respect from a distance but don't mix with. So you may find that there are certain devotees in the community you live with that you respect as Vaishnavas, but you don't mix intimately with them. In this way, it is a way to restrain these subtle offenses of the mind and, not have them impact the development of our devotional creeper. So I hope that answers your question there. Anyone else have any other questions they'd like to bring up pertaining to Svarupa Damodar, or anyone? A little earlier here, Madhurya Leelananda was mentioning that when I asked about who'd been to Puri, that her father had been stationed in Jagannath Puri during World War II. Wow, how fortunate for him. How fortunate for him.
I had something regarding Srila Prabhu's question, is that I was hearing that there's 6 different types of Vaishnava aparad actually. And one type is to not be pleased upon seeing a Vaishnava is considered Vaishnava aparad. So even though it's not external, even just to not be pleased, it's considered aparad. Yes,
for those of you that may not have been able to hear, Abai is mentioning here that one of the qualities, this is in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, it mentions that if when you see a devotee you don't think, oh, wonderful, the devotee. If you see a devotee and you think, oh, that devotee, oh, I really don't like him, that's actually an offense. So, yes, there are these types of mental offenses, but here again, we're not held accountable for the reaction to those, but they do have an impact on our development of our devotional creeper.
Okay.
Mauricio, you say you got 2 questions. Let them rip. Looks like they're going to be a while coming over here. Oh, here we go. Why did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Svarupa Damodar take sannyas not from Vaishnavas? The explanation given in that is not in the forefront of my mind at the moment. As I read that question, I thought, I know the answer to this, but I can't think of it. Abai, does anything come to mind with you?
What you explained about Svarupa Damodar was nice.
Right. Well, Svarupa Damodar, he was feeling some separation from the Lord and went to Varanasi, Benares, and just took sannyas there in just a, kind of a mood of separation without a lot of thought behind it in that way. It was part of his Leela, and when he returned to Puri, or when he went to Puri and returned himself to the service of Mahaprabhu, as I read his prayer, he begged the Lord to forgive him that he had, forgotten the Lord and engaged in this activity of leaving him like that. I'm going to research that, Mauricio, and have it for you next week. I'm going to jot that down. You got a pen? And make note of that and get that for you. Actually, Mauricio, if you want to send a question to Krishna.com, they'll get your email. They can forward that to me, and then I can give you that answer. Your second question, how did Svarupa Damodar's guru let him go to a Vaishnava town? Well, it mentions, I didn't get into that detail particularly, but it mentions that he requested his spiritual master to please, and we're talking, of course, Chaitanyananda Bharati, his sannyas guru, to please let him go to Puri because he wanted to associate with the devotees there. And the guru had no opposition to that. It wasn't that he necessarily was opposed to Vaishnavas. He himself may not have been in that particular mood, but he had no opposition to it. So there was no obstacle. He gave no particular restraint in Svarupa Damodar's leaving there and going. Matter of fact, he gave him his blessings. He said, yes, you can go like that. So that's the answer I have for you there. I'd like to turn now to the latter part of Mahaprabhu's life, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to the very end, as we might say, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intense austerities. And during this time, he was living very, very, very simply, very, very austerely, very deep penance and vratas. And he would sleep just on the stone floor, just throw a cloth down and just sleep on top of that cloth. And Jagadananda, of course, at that time his servant was Govinda Das and Svarupa Damodara. They were the two that were with him. And Jagadananda would always try to see to his comfort. And so he brought, actually Mahaprabhu was sleeping, it mentions, on plantain bark. Plantain bark would be laid down, and then they would throw just like a chutter over that, like, not a heavy wool chutter, but just some piece of cloth, some cutty cloth, and then he would lay on top of that. So the nature of Jagadananda Pandit was that he always wanted to see to the Lord's pleasure, because in Krishna Lila he was Satyabhama, one of Lord Krishna's wives in Dwarka. So he arranged for this nice mattress and pillow for the Lord that were stuffed with cotton. And nice, very comfortable like that. So it was brought before, Svarupa Damodara brought it before Mahaprabhu and mentioned that this has been brought and given to you, that you should use it. And Mahaprabhu became very angry. He said, "Who has given me this bed? Who has brought this bed?" And he heard from Govinda that Jagadananda Pandit had brought it, and immediately restrained his anger, because he knew there had been many pastimes which, with Jagadananda, where if Jagadananda became very upset or angry, then that was it. He would fast, or he would. One time he had a huge bottle of sandalwood oil, very expensive, he had brought for the Lord, and Jagadananda broke it when the Lord refused it, and sometimes he would go off and not eat, and all these different. So Mahaprabhu was a little, Jagadananda, a mattress, a pillow. Why don't you just get me a big bedstead with a nice headboard, and sannyasi is supposed to sleep in the ground. Jagadananda wants me to become a sense enjoyer instead of be a sannyasi. This is shameful for me. No, he would speak like this, but So, of course, Jagadananda became very upset when he heard the Lord didn't accept his mattress. And so Svarupa Damodara told him, I'm sorry, we offered. So then Svarupa Damodara, he was a very expert personality. He made an arrangement by which the mattress and pillow that were made by Jagadananda could be accepted. He took all the cotton out of the mattress and pillow and inserted plantain. Not exactly plantain, banana leaves, that's what it was. Banana leaves that had been torn and dried first and then torn into little pieces and put in there. So there was a little bit of, protection like that. It wasn't like a big cotton mattress and pillow. And so then they put those in there, and again the Lord refused. He said, "What? I'm perfectly comfortable sleeping there. So who has sent this?" Oh, Jagadananda. So he said to Svarupa Damodara, he said, "I tell him I will not accept this." So Svarupa Damodara relayed this to him. Anyway, the devotees were satisfied with this effort, but Jagadananda wasn't satisfied. So Jagadananda went to Mahaprabhu and he asked permission to please leave and go to Vrindavan. And, the Lord gave him his permission like that. But this is just an example of how Svarupa Damodara was very expert in trying to satisfy the Lord in the devotee's desires to serve the Lord, but at the same time allow the Lord to keep his particular vows and his strictness like that. So we're quite a bit after 9. We're going to go ahead and finish there this evening. These are just a few of the pastimes we have about Svarupa Damodara. We always like to leave a little bit so that if we go back, or if we get an opportunity to do a collection of all the loose ends that we've got over the last 30 broadcasts, we can have that available. So once again, we'd like to thank all of you. Bhaktin Karo, Madhurya Lilananda, Ras Rasika, Mauricio, Surfer Bob, Kevan, are you still out there? And all of you that have tuned in, Bhakta Scott, everybody, we appreciate that you come back week after week to share with us the hearing of these pastimes as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his associates. Mahaprabhu becomes very happy when the devotees relish hearing the activities of the Lord's devotees. So we should know that by gathering in this way through the internet, through the chat room, by hearing and talking about the pastimes of the Lord's devotees, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very satisfied with us. And with that, we'll end again, and thank you once again for joining us in another evening in the lives of the Vaishnava Acharyas. Hare Krishna.